Yeah, thank you very much. So you were mentioning regulators, and here now you have a regulator, or someone who should try to be a regulator. Just to explain you, I don't want to explain you how the institutions work, but I think it is important here to make up two main messages out of this slide. The first message is that the European Commission itself, when it takes decision, it's a single body. When it develops the preparatory work and the decision, it works through 36 different Directorate Generals. So I myself am working in the Environmental Directorate Generals, but there are 35 more. And this is, it requires a lot of internal coordination before we come out with some proposal. And the second point is that who takes the final decision, it's not the Commission itself that has only we can propose regulation directives, but the final decision is taken by the Councils of Ministers and the European Parliament. And the Councils is where the head of state sits and vote. And this is important for something that I will say at a later stage. But keep this in mind, this difference. Today, I want to quickly inform you about some activities that we are doing in the Commission and that are related to the carbon footprint and more to the environmental footprint, because there is in the Commission a shift. We started looking at carbon, and then we realized that carbon is fundamental, but it's not enough. So we need, and this is quite clear stream, we need to move from carbon to environmental footprint. And today I will briefly mention the activity that DG Climate Action is doing, and basically the very well-known emission trading scheme, or cap and trading scheme. DG Information Society, the activity they are doing on ICT for carbon footprinting. And then most of the few minutes left, I will speak about what we are doing in DG Environment on the environmental footprint. So why do we have an emission trading scheme? I think it's well known. It's because we have some international engagement. Everything started with Kyoto, but it's not ending with Kyoto. We had the last year, 2 years ago, negotiation in Copenhagen. Then we have Cancun. Then we have Rio +20, where these things will all be discussed again and again. We have some engagement to cut our emission in Europe. And we are trying to move towards a low-emission society in the coming years. But all this, we are realizing more and more, is not enough. So we have to do more activities on that. It is also important to keep in mind that ETS is not about product. ETS is about installations. They are currently covering more than 11,000 installations, big plants. They are now revising it. They are extending the scope of the emission trading scheme, but it will not move from the installation approach for the time being. So they will not be dealing with product for the time being. And they have a very well-developed monitoring, reporting, and verification approach to that. Recently, a couple of years ago, also the Information Society, the Directorate General, what we call INFSO, started to work on the carbon footprint. And that was because it was clear that there were carbon emissions increasing in the ICT sector, but also because it was becoming clearer and clearer how powerful the ICT sector could be as far as the enabling technology for driving more changes. So in 2009, they agreed at the international levels, all the major players in the ICT sector, they agreed to work together in order to develop a common methodology for carbon footprint calculation for ICT. They should deliver this by the end of this year. They are a bit late, but they still claim that they will deliver that by the end of this year. And then this issue was already also taken up by the Commissioner for Information Society, and in her digital agenda, she confirmed this engagement to have a methodology for carbon footprinting for ICT sector. And then we come to why DG Environment is working on that. As you have discussed yesterday, I wasn't here, but I'm sure that this came up. There is a blooming of methodologies. There is a blooming of labeling in Europe, but also worldwide. And while preparing the internal market revision in 2010, there was quite an important report from previous Commissioner Mario Monti, and he clearly highlighted that this blooming of green labeling and green labels may represent a disruption to the functioning of the internal market in Europe. And that was quite breaking news, because these messages that usually was coming from the Environmental Director General now was coming from the market, so very much closer to Enterprise Director General. And this started a brand new way of thinking and looking at things in the European Commission. And this then evolved in the Council conclusion of 20 December 2010. And the Council conclusion, if you remember back what I said at the beginning, the Council is where the head of state, the 27 member countries in Europe, say and vote. So the Council was asking the Commission, with relation to what also was mentioned in the Monti report, to develop a common methodology, European common methodology, for the quantitative assessment of environmental impacts of products throughout their life cycle, in order to support the assessment and the labeling of products. So it is not anymore something that the Commission itself is doing because we think this is right, but it's something that 27 member states and their heads of governments are asking us to do. And they are asking us to deliver that by next year, 2012, when the Commission will revise the Sustainable Production and Consumption Action Plan. This statement here, it is what we are now translating into our environmental footprint concept. So how we are implementing that in practice? In practice, what we are doing is we ask our Joint Research Center, that is the scientific branch of the European Commission, to develop these European harmonized methodologies. And we ask them, in particular, not to start from scratch, but to work building on what was already existing. So what they are doing is they are working both on product and on companies. So there will be two different but very similar methodologies. For product, they are scanning what has already been there in the ISO 14044, the 67, the handbook, the ILCD handbook, the French approach, PS 2050, the ecological footprint approach, and also, of course, what the greenhouse gas protocol has been doing. And then they are also looking for the corporate at a number of methodologies that I've listed there. How this methodology will look like. It will be fundamentally based on what the Commission already considered as the best available approach for life cycle making in Europe, that is the ILCD handbook, but it will be much more simpler than the ILCD handbook, that is a 400 pages, basically unreadable handbook, so it will be very much simpler. They will look at all the relevant environmental impacts. The methodology per se will be a self-standing one, so very much similar to what Cynthia just presented us. Then it will depend upon the policy implementation when a PCR-like will be necessary or not. It will be, of course, in line with the ISO standard, as all we do is always in line with ISO standard. It will probably have a product category-based approach, and it will be a simplified but not simple tool. And at the end of the day, maybe someone could ask why you are not simply using the ISO standard. Why do you need to develop another methodology? Well, the reason is that when it comes to policy making, especially when it comes to things that are that have some impact on budget and things like that, incentives and taxes, you need to reduce as much as you can the variability of your tool in order to increase the reproducibility. That's why we will start from the ISO, but then we have to funnel down the things. We have to reduce the flexibility that is inherent in the ISO standards and in all the other standards that are existing around. So we have to have a reduced flexibility that will hopefully allow an higher reproducibility, I cannot pronounce that, of the results. We are working under very close timelines because the Council just decided 2012 is a nice date, and they ask us to deliver by 2012 without realizing how much work is behind that. So what we are doing is that JRC is completing in these very hours the analysis of the existing technologies, methodologies, sorry. Then they will draft methodology guidelines by June for products. And then we will have a 6-month testing on products, and we also start the testing on companies. In November, we will have a stakeholder consultation on the methodology. It will be not an open stakeholder consultation, and that's unfortunate, but it's because of time pressure. So we will invite a number of selected key stakeholder, member states representatives, all the major methodology developers, and some other important stakeholders on the NGO side, but also on the industry association side. We will have with them a consultation on the methodologies. And then early next year, January probably, we will have then the open stakeholder consultation that will be more on the policy options that we envisage for the application of the methodology. We recently make public all these, and you probably have received, most of you have received an email either from me or from some other stakeholders informing you that about the plans of the Commission and about the call for applicants that we published in order to receive applications for this testing. The call is still open. It will close the 13th of May 2011. As I mentioned, the pilots will start in July, and they will end by December for products and by February for companies. The target are producers, retailers, associations that are working on real products and on real sites. And in order to save time, we are also saying that we favor application from companies or organizations that already have experience in LCA, that already have done LCA studies, so that will reduce the amount of data that they have to collect and make it easier to stay within the 6 months time frame. Differently from what is going to happen in France, this testing will not look at how you communicate your information to the final consumer. But this doesn't mean that we believe that is not important. On the contrary, this is probably the most challenging part. But we will look at that using other tools, using specific studies. And something has already been done. Ernst & Young has done already some quite interesting study in the field, and something else is done by DG Sanco, that is the Director General looking for the consumer protection. We know that we have to define what to communicate. So are we going for the 3 indicators? Are we going for 4 indicators, 5 indicators? How much information can the final consumer or the final user, in case of business to business information, how much information can they really deal with? And then how to communicate. Numbers, it seems, is not the best approach. A lot of people prefer the grade approach, and so we will explore all the different options and see what impact do they have, and also where you communicate. Do you communicate through shelf tag? Do you communicate on package? Do you communicate through barcode? And it is important to have a careful look at that, also because it has an implication on the WTO rules. We are already working on that. We are already analyzing the legal implications of the different options, and they have different legal implications according to how you choose on WTO rules. So our trade department is already looking at that, and we will also take a decision based on that. So I hope I stayed within my time limits. For any further information, apart from the question that you will ask me now, I invite you to write to this email, because all the colleagues involved in this work, they will have direct access to this email, and they will be able to reply to you in the most efficient time way. Thank you very much for your attention.